Hello and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I am your host. It is my pleasure to have here once again with me Corey Anker, who is a life and leadership coach, as well as the co-founder of the Uncovery Project. Hello once again, Corey.
Hi. Good to be back.
Yes, thank you for being back. I was going to say that. So we touched a little bit about on the project, on the Uncovery Project. Mm-hmm. Could you go a little bit more in depth about what the project is about and what your goal is with it?
Sure. So we were talking about authenticity.
Yep.
And I said that one of the founding principles of this project is that authenticity equals power. That the more we are just aware and connected to what's really true for us, our wants, our needs, our desires, like our story, that the more powerful we are. And again, powerful meaning, able to have an impact on ourselves, the people around us.
Yeah.
So I called it the Uncovery Project because to be uncovered is to be vulnerable and ultimately authentic if you're not covering up.
Right.
It also harkens to the word recovery. Mm-hmm. And the idea of recovery in the world, 12-step work, et cetera, it's a very powerful, it's a powerful space, it's a powerful set of guidelines and principles that is making a difference in the lives of a lot of people. I myself have actually been in recovery for a little more than 9 years.
Wow.
And there is if you thought of a Venn diagram, there's an overlap between coaching, recovery work, leadership. There's also overlap with other support disciplines like therapy and consulting, but in particular, I created this to be sort of taking some of the effectiveness of 12-step work and applying it in a more general way. So to be clear, it's not that everybody needs a 12-step program. It's not that everybody's a conventional addict or that kind of thing.
Right.
But to varying degrees, we all have repetitive patterns of behavior. They're not always positive, even if it's tardiness.
Right.
That's a
I know
cycle.
about that one.
Right? Most of the people, if you know someone
I'm in recovery for that one.
There you go. If you know somebody who's not so great at being punctual, that person, it's not like it happens once a year.
No, and it's not like, for example, for me, I didn't want to be late, but I ended up being late every single time.
Right. Thanks for saying so. And so, it's at some point you got to be like, this isn't just the train broke down and whatever, right? It's,
or I had an emergency or whatever.
Right, because it wouldn't happen, right. So there's a choosing in there. There's a default kind of mechanism going on. So the way I like to talk about it is like a pool. And if you think of the deep end of the pool as somebody who's really, an addict and the kind of addict that might be, say, putting a needle in their arm every day and straddling the line between life and death, where they're thinking about using, so that's like way on the deep end of the pool. And then on the way shallow end of the pool might be somebody who's can't seem to show up on time, can't keep their physical space tidy.
Yeah.
So their time space, their physical space, their emotional, like something, and it's considered like a spectrum. Yeah. And I have it that, part of being a human being is, we chunk information so that we can operate at higher and higher levels.
Right.
When you're a kid, getting dressed, sock, shoe, pants on, right. Now you don't think about it. You just get ready and go out the door. When you first learn to drive, same thing, right? Key, shift. Now you just, I'll meet you there.
Sure.
Because you chunk information.
Have to think about it,
So it's the same kind of thing. Like I think that we just take on patterns of behavior, and there's like bugs in the programming sometimes. And so taking a look at, these are ways that people are being inauthentic, and again, to varying degree.
Right.
So taking that kind of work, which involves taking ownership and being authentic, being vulnerable, qualities like humility. They're the things that you see in a great leader. And working those muscles, and there's a marriage there. So while the work can support people, now I personally don't work with people who are in the throes of that behavior. But if the most destructive elements are handled, there's an opportunity to create from there. And again, wherever somebody is in the pool, they may not be in a really like overtly self-destructive pattern,
right?
But if they can't get out of their own way, and they're looking to break through into the next level, even so much as like the corporate culture in a company, where they just can't get, right? Taking a look at that, and so utilizing, coach training and coaching and leadership training, and there's 12-step elements, and it all kind of works together.
That's amazing. That's really great. So that's something that you're doing now, that you're actually, you have this ongoing?
So I've been working with clients around this kind of work, and the goal is to ultimately spread it out and create, I think movement is a word I haven't wrapped my mind around yet, but if I'm really honest and authentic, I would say that would be the goal.
The next step, the goal.
Yeah, it's really because it's creating a larger space and bringing in, I think there's an opportunity to have an impact in some places that really need it, like schools, homes, families, communities,
Yeah. Yeah, no, it just made me think, I was watching television the other night, and I wasn't even planning on watching this show, but it just came on, and it was like about the prison system, actually, and about juvenile, so like teenagers who are in prison. And just the rate of them going back to prison, it was like so high because they started, maybe they were like pickpocketing when they were 12 or 13. And then that would lead to something more serious later on when they were like 16 or 17. And they were pretty much raised in the system. And I was thinking about, how are we failing these kids? Because you talked about schools, right? And most of these kids come from inner city, neighborhoods. So like very rough, riddled with addiction. I mean, practically all of them had one or both parents who were addicted to something. And it just created this chain migration to the jail, to the point where they said that in about 10 years or less than 10 years, 1 out of every 4 of these teenagers, of this youth, will have one or both parents in jail. And that is very worrisome. Like, to me, I couldn't sleep after I watched that. And it was at night. I mean, it's a terrible situation, but I was just wide awake. I was like,
it's frightening.
Why? And something like this would be...
I think something that I think both sort of dynamics share is the idea of short-term benefits traded for long-term costs.
Right.
And you see that with addictive behaviors, where like say, if you use drugs, for example, right? So you get high, but that heroin addict is constantly having to do that and look at what life looks like in order to stay in contact with the substance, right? I think with some of the dynamic that you're talking about in those kinds of families or homes, again, I think crime is it's like the easy way out. It's a way to cut corners, because the perception is, sitting at a desk for X hours a day, making Y dollars an hour, just seems hard, and it's set up as unsavory.
And I feel like because they didn't see like doctors and lawyers and people who were just like blue collar workers at their neighborhood, that sort of became the norm. Like a life of crime became the norm, and that's why these kids ended up in jail.
It's a communal culture.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but okay, so we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to take a little break here.
Great.
So stick with us. We'll be back after this break. And welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. Once again, I have Corey Anker here with me. So Corey, we're talking about addiction, and I mentioned this, more extreme example that I saw with like the kids being raised in jails and prisons across the United States. What do you think is the one thing that could actually prevent somebody from becoming an addict? So like nipping it at the bud before it happens.
That's a big, meaty question. What could prevent someone? I think that, first of all, you have to get clear about how addiction occurs. And there's a lot of research. Some of it's in alignment with itself, and some of it's in conflict. My own personal experience and the experience that I've had from clients, from fellow members of other circles I travel in, is that there may be some kind of chemical predisposition, but that environment,
like an imbalance.
Environment plays a big factor also. So you see a lot of times either an acute trauma, an abuse where somebody really wants to like overtly numb out to escape the memory and the experience.
Which is what happened with a lot of these kids that I was talking about.
Sure.
They went through traumatic experiences.
So that's one. And the other one that I tend to see is what I call chronic messaging. So if you are raised in a home where it's not an acute trauma, but it's kind of like a chipping away of self-esteem, or you find yourself in a caretaking role where parent-child relationship flips, things like that. So your question was about preventing.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is, I think, getting clear about need and then having the needs met responsibly, on purpose. So again, connection, love.
I was going to say,
Oftentimes, if you show me somebody who's engaged in a pattern of behavior like that, there's usually something missing that's attempted to fill. It's usually not very successful. If it was, that kind of loop would bend into a line and actually progress in a direction, and typically that kind of behavior really, it's just a cycle. It's just a cycle, it's a cycle. So.
Yeah, because I was going to say, like, do you believe that the teenagers, the young people that we have nowadays, do you think they are equipped to actually say what they want and or need?
It's a good question. And
do they have the emotional intelligence?
Do they have it? Do the parents have what it takes to really be there consistently? We're a very distracted group of people these days.
Indeed.
We like our technology. We like, we're consumers, and we'll consume not just eating, but we'll consume in any way. There's a lot of stimuli.
Information.
A lot of stimuli out there. So I don't know. The honest answer is that I don't know really what could prevent it. I think that, doing the best you can to raise a healthy child, both biologically and socially and emotionally and mentally, is a good start.
Sure.
I think being aware, so that when things crop up, are they noticed? I think associations, if you're looking at young people, it's a lot of the conventional things, right? Looking who their friends are and how are they spending their time, and is there isolation? I think there are things that accompany that kind of thing. But again, if we take, I think the word addiction still has a stigma to it.
Oh, of course.
And it's understandable, right? Because we have pictures in our minds of like people who aren't bathing and people who are neglecting oral hygiene.
Exactly.
But not everybody. Again, if you think of my pool metaphor, even if you're not in the deep end and not in the shallow end, but you're somewhere where it starts to deepen. It looks like I could show you somebody in a suit who has compulsive behavior. It doesn't. It looks like a lot of different things at a lot of different times. So, what's really going on there? What's being compensated for? What's being tried to offset, or someone's filling a gap? And I think, as humans, I think our needs tend to get met one way or another. Nobody, nature abhors a vacuum. If you need something, at some point, something's going to fill that. The question is,
find something.
But is it being filled on purpose? In service of something, health or whatever, or is it kind of reactive? So I don't know if I really answered the question, but I spoke to it, right?
Of course you did. Because I was actually thinking about, even in my own personal life, for example, with being late, right? Chronically late. Like I said, it wasn't something that I wanted to do. I wasn't consciously wanting to be late every single time that I said to somebody that I was going to be there at 7, and I end up showing up at 7:10, right? Or 7:05, doesn't matter. Even if I showed up at 7:01, it was late. And then I would beat myself about it. And then it was just like a never-ending loop, because I ended up thinking that I was a terrible person, that I was always late, that I always made people wait for me, that I couldn't just deliver on something so simple as my word, like I'm going to be there at such time. And how I got out of that was actually by just paying attention to the behavior and like what preceded that behavior. Like if I knew that I had to be somewhere at, say, 6, what was I doing like an hour before, right?
So setting yourself up better.
Exactly, setting myself up better, because I know, for example, that if I'm going somewhere, I probably need a little bit more time than the average person.
Yeah.
And
whatever
maybe,
time you think you need, just
Exactly, maybe just adding like 10 or 15 minutes actually helps me, because that way I know that I won't be late and I will actually be there in time to just, sit down, relax, and not be like out of breath and just thinking that I'm the worst person in the world because I cannot keep my word. So,
well, there was some benefit to it, right?
Oh no, of course.
There's always a benefit somewhere, right? To the things that we
and people were very lenient to my tardiness. That was the other thing too. Like I sort of trained them to be like, oh, you know what, but he's here, it's fine, or he will do a great job, it's okay. So they were excusing my bad behavior.
Sure, yeah. Well, a colleague of mine recently said, we win at the games we play.
Always.
And so that's a great example, right? Like you set that up a particular way and then you won.
Yeah.
Right, you were late.
Yeah.
And
I still felt terrible, but I won.
Well, and maybe that was part of the,
Yeah.
in the realm of, addictive behaviors in particular, not maybe the deepest depths, but where it starts to take the cost goes up a little bit.
Yeah.
There's, some degree of widespread thought that there is a punishing element to it.
Yeah.
It may not begin that way.
Sure.
It may look on the surface like, seeking pleasure or seeking
validation.
Yeah. Escape something. But if you dig a little deeper, you see that there's, and I'm not a therapist, but you dig a little deeper and you tend to find something in, usually some form of unworthiness. And again, varying degrees. Right?
Yeah.
Some people are really
Which
self-deprecating. Some,
Yeah.
And I think, again, there's a common fabric, I think, amongst all people that we're protecting from something that we want to be safe, and so,
And once again, like, I believe that it goes back to what we were talking about in terms of addiction, it also being a lack of connection, right? When you don't have a connection either to yourself or to other people that are important to you, I believe that, as from the people that I've worked with, from what I've seen, what I've read, that you would seek out something that would fill that void.
Sure. And again, if you take the stigma out of it and you just look at it flat, no judgment or anything.
Yeah. No right or wrong.
It's a power leak. I mean, it's, you talk about being, in the last segment we were talking about being inauthentic and what it takes to manufacture the story or the projection.
Right.
To keep repetitive patterns of behavior going takes resources. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes money. It can be exhausting.
Yeah.
So, to put that down and to become authentic again and more, it's something that, it plugs the hole.
For sure.
And you get your power back, basically. Instead of it kind of spilling out, you kind of get it back, so.
Yeah. This is fascinating. So, okay, so we're going to stop here for this segment, but we'll be back for the last segment. Aww. But for everybody watching, stick with us. We'll be back after this. And welcome back to I Am. I'm just going to jump in with Corey over here. So, Corey, I like to ask people like rapid fire questions sometimes.
Okay.
So, when I say a word, you just, tell me what comes to mind, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
So, children.
Love.
Okay. Love.
Children. Open.
Open. Coaching.
Power.
Okay. And leadership.
Freedom.
Okay. And recovery.
Health.
And I am.
I am Eric Faria. No.
No, that's me. Okay.
I am me. That's what comes.
Nice. So, do you have a, sometimes like people talk about the connection that they have to either, a higher power, to nature, to themselves, to what have you. Do you have something that you actually connect to on a daily basis or often enough that you feel, powers you and, just gives you that energy that you need to get through the day and for your life?
Yeah, I love that. I believe, I'm a spiritual person, which for me, not that spirituality has to contrast with religion, but if I relate to it that way, I feel like spirituality is a very connective dynamic. I feel like religion has a way of kind of carving it all up and people fighting over it,
Yeah.
And
It's more structured in the sense
as a human being and also somebody in recovery, to me it's about connecting with something larger than me, that I believe that I'm behind the wheel of the car in my day-to-day, in my life. I have free will. I choose where I go and what I do.
Right.
But it's not a great thing to have, no humility and to feel like you are the mightiest that there is. It's lonely. It's also, it can be dangerous. It can be. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. So anything that would be above. For some people, it's a conventional God. For other people, it's, I've heard the acronym Good Orderly Direction.
Oh, that's okay.
It could just be energy in the universe.
Yeah.
We're all connected, whatever that is. For me, I think it's a code of behavior. I think it's, doing the best to behave appropriately even when nobody's looking. And I had talked, I honestly don't remember if it was this segment or the last one, we were talking about physical fitness.
Yes.
And the one-to-one, output to input. And I feel the same way in terms of behavior. I think if you are, behaving in a way that you feel, it's not necessarily, look, there's the law, there's objective, right, wrong, but if it's really about, I think, the individual. If I'm behaving in a way that I know or feel is not appropriate and I'm out of alignment with myself, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
that's
going to work.
Fodder for guilt and shame, which are very, disempowering emotions, the part of the human experience, but they're not the most fun. Right?
Yeah.
So behaving in a way that's, in accordance with what I feel is right keeps me energized. It keeps me proud, not cocky, but confident.
Sure.
So for me, that's a big part of it. It's treating my fellow man well. It's, So.
As you were talking, you mentioned fitness, right?
Yeah.
I had, last season, I had a physical trainer who was here and she said, what is the litmus test of whether you want to work out or not, or whether you should or not? She said, just look at yourself in the mirror before you go to take a shower. Look at yourself naked in the mirror. Do you like what you see? If you don't, then maybe it is time for you to do something about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is genius. So simple, right? But I totally get what you're talking about, being responsible and being connected and being...
and how you feel. It's like how you relate to it. Because at the end of the day, I don't think happiness, even in this sort of consumer society, is about what we have so much as it is how we feel about what we have. Right? Because you show me somebody who's present to what they have and they're grateful for that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the number is, what it's so.
Right, yeah, it's your experience
Right.
of that, yes. I get that, and I feel the same way. So, if you were to, say, go back to your teenage self, what is the one thing that you would tell yourself as a teenager? Maybe say like a 17 or 18-year-old, Corey is finishing high school. What would you tell that young man?
Not surprisingly, it would be exactly what we're talking about, which
Really?
is to just be yourself. Just be, because I was a great performer, on stage and off. As a kid, as a young person, I knew very well what inauthenticity was, and it just felt like the thing to do to get what I wanted, which was connection.
Right.
And of course, as I got older, I learned, well, that comes from just drop the shield and be authentic. So I would say, take the resources you're channeling towards trying to be, and just be. And wherever that goes is exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's very powerful.
Like you, don't like you, want to be with you.
Yeah,
You'll find your tribe, and you're not connected to people you're performing for anyway. It's an illusion of connection.
It is an illusion. Yeah, because I remember going back to when I was in the closet, like I had to perform a certain way, but it was still a performance. It wasn't fully 100% Eric. It wasn't me. It was like a version of me that I thought was me, but it really wasn't. Would you say that authenticity is the lesson that has taken you the longest to learn?
Ooh. I'm not so sure. I don't know if it's the lesson that took the longest to learn.
Yeah.
But it's a project that is constantly worked on. Because there's always that natural pull to shade it or to, So I think it's a consciousness, it's a choice, it's, There's a quote that says perfection is attained not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away.
Oh.
And it reminds me of that.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's an ongoing. It'll probably be a work of my lifetime.
That's good.
But I've taken ground in it. There's just more distance to travel.
So we're coming towards the end here, and I always ask my guests, like, if they want to leave our audience with a book, a quote, a movie, an album, what have you, that you would recommend to people that you feel like has touched, moved, or inspired you.
I think there's a book by Don Miguel Ruiz called The Four Agreements.
I love that book.
And, for anyone who's aware of it, they'll nod their head. And for anyone who hasn't read it, it's 100 and something pages.
Yeah.
It's a little clunky. It's not the smoothest writing, but essentially you're being handed 4 access points and 4 ways to practice that are so simple to understand and yet challenging to implement.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to take them on, it's basically guaranteed to have a positive impact on all areas of your life.
For sure.
So that's one. And then for anybody who feels a little disconnected or maybe had some experiences in their youth where they felt misunderstood, or they're still, I think Alice Miller wrote a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child. And again, it's very accessible, it's not very long, and it's just powerful, just really powerful.
Well, I will look into that one. That one I'm only hearing from you now. So what was the name of that one again?
It's called The Drama of the Gifted Child.
Great.
By Alice Miller.
Great. So, Corey, it was a pleasure to have you here.
It was great to be here.
Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
like
Great.
2 episodes. I know we could continue to talk, and I'm sure that we will at some point. So,
That'd be great.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And for everybody who wants to get in touch with Corey, you can find the information at the end of the episode. And thank you once again. So, we will be back with a new episode of I Am next week. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you then.